So Genius Guild, we are a traditional VC fund based in the great city of Chicago. We were founded over 4 years ago, but I've been in this space for quite a long time. I founded an organization called Digital Undivided, which brought me actually to Emerge in 2019. So I'm back here. It's great. Yes. Thank you for bringing me back to Miami at the early spring. It's not always so warm in Chicago right now. And before that, I was one of the founders of one of the first startups led by a Black woman, which sold to a public company. And I sold my company in 2012. So I've been in this space for a while. I started my startup in 2002, over 22 years ago. And so I've been in the startup space for a really long time. In terms of when I first thought thinking big, I would have to say it was probably fourth grade. I had a very lucrative friendship bracelet business. I had cornered the friendship bracelet market in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I grew up.
I was eating Jell-O pudding at fourth grade. And you already had a business, okay.
Had a business, and in fact, my first sales force, my first celebrity spokesperson was my older brother, who's with me today, and he's a sales executive. I often joke I gave him his first sales job, but he was a star basketball player in high school, and so he helped me sell into the high school market, because I was in elementary school and I had that market, but I knew high schoolers had more allowance, and so they could afford custom bracelets. And so I did that and had a number of other opportunities. But I think where it all originated was I grew up in a family where I was encouraged to think big. And I'm a parent. How many of you are parents here? Just like, yeah. One of the greatest gifts my parents gave me was they never told me I couldn't do something. So my father would always ask, how much is this going to cost me? But he never said,
you can't.
You can't. And as a result of that, I grew up not only thinking big, but knowing that I could do big things, because there was never any limits placed on me. And so that's where I would say it came from, is that I had this family that encouraged me to think big. No matter how crazy my ideas were, they encouraged that. And then I grew up as an adult to also think that way and encourage others as well.
Is it something that drives you? Because I very much grew up with a father that also instilled in me this idea to dream big. I'm from Venezuela. When I said I want to be a journalist in the United States, he's like, you can do that, Mari. Yeah. And now that's a driving force for me of I can't let him down. Yeah. You know, does that happen to you as well?
Yeah, my father passed away 20 years ago. And I remember one time, I was in high school. I don't want to date myself too much, but it was the 90s and it was grunge and I was not dressed the best, we'll say that. But I was kind of dressing down. You know, I'm 5'10", I have this presence, right? And I thought if I dressed down, if I shrunk myself, people wouldn't see me, that maybe I could hide. And I think a lot of women, we feel that way, right? We kind of put ourselves to the side, hope people don't look at us. And we're driving, and my father said to me, he said, you know, you are a big girl. You are 5'10". You come into a room and people see you, right? And so give them something to look at. And that just really stuck with me. Yes, right? Like, show up. You cannot shrink yourself even if you wanted to. So why do it? And I would say that to everyone, like, show up as your authentic self, your true self. Being small does not serve you or anyone else in your life. And so showing up as who you are, it not only helps you, but ironically enough, it also gives other people to show up as themselves too. You'll be surprised at how many people who you don't even really have, you think you don't have a connection with, will look at you and say, wow, because you showed up to this meeting, or you showed up to this conference, being who you are, gave me permission and made me feel comfortable to show up as myself too.
Absolutely, because people will see you, Kathryn, and say, she made it.
Yeah.
She didn't have to change who she was. You're creating space for other people. And I love that the women in the room clapped with this idea of you shouldn't be made to feel small, because there is a point in our lives where, you know, we're made to think like, you're a bit too much. You have to tone this down.
Yeah.
I remember for me, as a native Spanish speaker, it was also this idea of how I pronounced my name on the air or when I walked into a room. Hi, my name is Mariana. This is Mariana coming to you live. And there was a point in my career early on where I was like, this is Mariana. And I'm like, who is that? That's not my authentic self, right? And you're not creating space for other women with names who may sound different or who may look different to look at you and say, wow, she's creating space for me. So tell me about also, you're ripe to sort of take a big bite out of the world. Your parents instilled in you this drive. Was there any point in your life where you had fear of failure? And how should people navigate that?
Yeah, I think anytime you are an other, and it's not just race or gender, but it could be economic status, it could be disability, whatever it may be, whenever you're an other, there's always this pressure because you represent so many people, right? There's so many people. You may be the first that was hired. And so there's always this fear of letting other people down. It's not even really about you sometimes. It's, I represent all of this for other people. I'm in this room that others don't get in, and I need to make sure I show up and I have to win. And so I've had that quite a bit in my career of, I know that I'm in this privileged position and I want to make sure that other people who are like me get in that position as well. So I want to show up as best as I can. Unfortunately, that does put an extra burden on us, on you as an individual, sometimes unfair, right? And so this fear of failure, and I think anybody who's ran a startup or an entrepreneur, you know that this fear can be, it can add a lot of stress. It can be overcoming too. I mean, if you are leading a startup and you convince these people to leave their cushy corporate job, right, to join you in this big idea that you don't even really know if it's going to work or not yet, it can be scary. However, all great things happen from those who take the risk, right? All the best ideas in the world are from people who took risks. And being in that position and continuing through that fear, that's how great things get made. And so that's what I remind myself of whenever I'm doing something that's big and bold and maybe no one has thought about it, is wow, like all the things that have happened because people took a risk and they had no idea what was going to be next, but they did it.
I oftentimes sense the fear of failure sort of in my body. You know, it can be paralyzing at times. Is there one trick to sort of shake it off, in Taylor Swift's words?
You know, I'm always reminded of something a friend said to me. I was doing a pitch in Silicon Valley, and this was like maybe 2012. There were not very many people like me who was pitching. I was on Sand Hill Road at a very, very, very well-known VC fund that I will not mention, but it starts with an A and ends with a Z, if you know. And I'm pitching, and you know, I was just really scared. And she said to me, you go in there and you are the most fascinating person they've met today. She's like, tell yourself, you are the most fascinating person. In a sea of Patagonia vests and all-bird shoes, you're coming in with the big hair and the bright shoes, and I had sneakers on because I was trying to fit in, but they were cool sneakers, they were different. And she's like, and remember, you are the most interesting thing they have talked to all day. She's like, probably all month. And that like totally changed because I was coming in with a lot of fear, and then I was like, you know what? I'm the most interesting thing they've met, person they talked to today. And it made me come in that way. And we later at Digital Divided, one of our very first checks was from Andreessen Horowitz, and because of that. But just really, it's almost like acting in many ways. One of the things I recommend to entrepreneurs we invest in is to take improv classes.
Oh, wow, okay.
Improv or stand-up comedy. Not to become a comedian, but you know, who knows, maybe you will. But it's something about improv and stand-up comedy that really gets you used to being in front of people and in performing. And when you're in an early stage, particularly when you're raising pre-growth, so you're, you know, pre-seed to Series A, but maybe even a little bit when you head into growth stage, you're gonna be performing, right? You're gonna be performing all the time. You're gonna be performing and pitching to customers. You're gonna be performing and pitching to potential investors. And so getting used to that and getting training in that is so helpful for you. especially for those of us who are more introverts and a little bit quiet. It helps you come out of your space and learn to even pretend for the hour you have in that meeting that maybe you're a little bit extrovert, and it really, 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 really helps.
I love what you said, and this is actually the first time that I'll admit this publicly. I've also had sort of classes with stand-up comics because I have to host some of the biggest conferences in the world, and sometimes there's a fire alarm, like today. Sometimes people are late from lunch. Some people are talking over you, and you need those tools that you don't necessarily have. And I think what you said is amazing because we think that we're supposed to be born with these tools, but there's no way as founders and executives that you're then going to know how to work a room. So just take the time to learn the tools and say, okay, this is missing in my roster. Let me go see then how I can acquire these tools. Yeah. Tell me, Kathryn, about the role of entrepreneurship and mentoring, of entrepreneurship and community, especially when it comes to fostering this think big mentality in early stage startups.
Yeah, in my book, Build a Damn Thing, I talk a lot about being a part of communities and how mentorship has helped me. Sometimes it's very hard to know that you can do things, especially if you come from resource poor communities, to know that you can, what the possibilities are if you don't see someone like yourself actually doing that. And when I talk about resource poor, it's more expansive than just gender and race. I'm also from Minneapolis, right? And so, which until recently didn't have a very large startup community. So seeing other people succeed who are from communities that you are a part of really helps you to sort of imagine what's going on. As entrepreneurs, I also think it's a very hard, can be a very lonely path. Sometimes you're the only one that sees what the vision is, right? Other people may not get it yet. And so surrounding yourself with other dreamers and other people who are dreamers and doers is really, really important, not just for your success from a professional standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint in helping you reduce stress. You know, making tough decisions, being with other entrepreneurs who've had to make those decisions.
Yes.
And so finding those communities that you can tap into. Another thing that I also suggest is creating, and in the book I talk about this a lot, your personal advisory board. So we all know a corporate advisory board, right? Those are people who give us advice on our companies. Maybe they're, you know, early angel investors, what have you. Your personal advisory board are in the business of you. Meaning these are people who care about you as a human being outside of your company, outside of your entrepreneurship. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be business people. So my mother is on my personal advisory board.
My mother could not be on my personal advisory board.
Well, let me tell you what she does. My mother is a 75-year-old black grandma. No one says no to her. It just doesn't work, right? And so whenever people come to me, and you know, when you're a public person, you have family members and other people who see you, and they, you know, want different things from you. My mother relishes in the ability to say no, and I give her permission to say no. She's gotten creative in figuring out how to say no. And that's been really helpful for me because I come from a community where I want to be invited to the cookout. Like, I want to be invited to the family party. So if I say no, it carries a lot more weight, where she can say no and no one's gonna argue with a grandma, right? And so it doesn't seem like something you need, but it really, really does help. I have friends on there who will tell me, quote unquote, about myself. If I'm ever thinking too big of myself,
This is one of those
another
moments,
one. Oh gosh, are we supposed to go?
This already happened today, so I think it's a false alarm, but let's just hang out and see what the tech folks tell us.
This is hilarious.
I know. We're testing out your stand-up comedian skills now.
Right.
So.
Another thing, you gotta be creative as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Let's hang out for a little bit until we find out what's going on. There was a false alarm about 2 hours ago. Were you here for that one?
No.
You missed the fun.
That would have
So it was a false alarm, so let's hang out, folks. Well, we can still keep having
did
the
everyone have
conversation.
to head out, like outside?
I think we should just hang until they tell us to definitively get up.
It's a beautiful day outside, so we can continue talking
continue
outside.
the conversation
I have no
out
problem We can hold court outside. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Let's wait for a little bit.
Let's just give it a beat and see
Perfecto.
what they say over there.
Buenísimo. So listen, I want to follow up on the personal advisory board question.
Yep.
For the folks here in the room, how do you start even configuring that for yourself? Like if you have no communities that can really mentor you, what are the first steps?
I think, one, figuring out the person who's a truth teller.
Oh, yes.
Someone who will tell you the truth and who you want to hear the truth from. Because there's people who will give you feedback and advice, but you don't want to really hear from them. You don't care about them. You don't want to hear their opinion. But finding someone whose opinion or someone's opinions that you trust, that can give you honest feedback, and you know that feedback is coming from a place of good.
That's really important.
Right?
That there's no ill will, that you kind of trust their intention.
Their intentions are good, and you know that, and who can tell you the truth when you need to hear it, both good and bad. Because I think sometimes when we talk about truth tellers, we frame it in a negative. It's also positive, right? When you are doing well, this person can tell you when you're doing well. But many of us don't have truth tellers in our lives, and especially as you're building companies, whether you're an entrepreneur within a corporation or an entrepreneur outside, you need that guidance from someone to say, hey, that wasn't great, or hey, that was really, really great. So I think, first of all, finding the truth tellers. Finding who I call the enforcer.
Okay.
I talk about a lot in my book about this. My mother is one of my enforcers. Again, so I don't have to be the bad person. And when you are a leader and you're heading up something, what you say holds different weight than someone else. When you are the face of your company, when you're the CEO, you're the founder, people, whatever you say becomes sort of the face of the company, right? It's the word of the company. So sometimes you can't say certain things. Not because you're not a great person, you're not a strong person, but because if you say it, it's absorbed, it's taken differently. And so finding someone who can be that.
I have somebody like that in my company. I call her bad cop, and that's
Bad
my
cop.
sister who's actually backstage. I'm good cop because for many things, I'm front-facing, right? And many times she often plays the bad cop, and people actually appreciate that about her because they can get to answers also much quicker, you know? So enforcer, truth teller, is there another role there?
Oh, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other ones. One I have, and this one is an interesting one in my personal advisory board, but it's the comedian.
Okay, wow.
Entrepreneurship is really hard. Sometimes you just really, really, really need to laugh. And I have a couple of comedians. My number one comedian is my 8-year-old son, who is just absolutely hilarious. So if, I have an investment that's not doing well, I just go home and I have a conversation with this 8-year-old who tells me a whole story about toilet people. It's really hard to be upset when you have this person who just sort of reframes it all for you and does a rap about people who live in the toilet. And it just brings you back to what really matters in life, because sometimes we get in, we're in business, we're business people, and things that we do matter, but we're also human beings.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention,
You
please?
got it.
The fire alarm has been sounded. This alarm has been inadvertently activated.
We're good.
Return to the venue and enjoy the rest of your visit.
Thank you for staying with us, guys. Thank you.
May it cause.
Okay.
For your patience and cooperation.
We went from
Thank you
toilet
for
people
being
to
calm.
fire alarms.
Thank you for being calm. Thank you. God, I know I can trust you in an emergency. I know you've been through this now. So I love this idea of someone just to keep it in perspective and keep it lighthearted. Let's turn to this idea of, innovation and thinking big are linked. How do you strike the balance between groundbreaking ideas and then the feasibility of actually being able to execute them?
Yeah, I think at the beginning stage, it's really about getting out to potential customers. And I think what happens, particularly with early entrepreneurs, how many of you are early on stage? Let's say pre-seed, seed, so a couple of you. How many are at growth? Let's say Series B, okay. It really is about being with customers and at the very early stage when you have your company, it's your baby, right? It can be scary to go out and start to interact with potential buyers, potential customers. But that's really where you start to get that transition from idea to innovation, that transition from idea to actual product and company is really getting out there and speaking. And we all know, the build, measure, learn, the feedback loop, the business model canvas, all of those sort of tools. And if you haven't heard of those tools as an early stage entrepreneur, make sure you search for them. Business model canvas is available free if you search on Google, but it's a really great tool. And even as you head into growth, it's a really great way to sort of operationalize what you're thinking, particularly around different product lines and stuff. But it's really just getting out and talking. And that can be really hard because some of the feedback you may hear may not be the feedback that you want. Like, we all think our baby is cute, right? We all think our baby is wonderful. Sometimes our baby is not cute. Maybe we have an ugly baby, right? But no parent wants to think in that way. No founder wants to think in that way about their idea, but really that's how you get the feedback and you translate from idea to actual product is by getting out there.
I think also this idea of feedback requires a mind shift because, and I'm on camera, right? So I'm such a people pleaser and I want people to like me, but feedback isn't bad. Feedback actually means that people care enough to look at what you are offering them and then give you, hopefully, something constructive for you to fix it.
And not all feedback is equal. Not everyone's feedback should be given the same weight.
Yes.
And so as a head of anything, again, entrepreneur, being able to determine and discern, like having discernment about whose feedback matters is very, very, very important. And to make sure that you don't give the same level of feedback to all feedback. And I see a lot of folks make that mistake, is that everyone gets the same level of feedback. Your immediate boss has a different level of feedback than someone who's maybe a colleague. Your lead investor, maybe their feedback is weighted a little bit more than the person who was the angel investor for 5K, right? So not everyone's feedback should be given the same level, and that's really important as you grow your companies to remember that. And it can be hard because we're in this social media, very public space. Almost everyone's a public person now where you're constantly getting feedback. And to be able to determine whose feedback matters is really crucial to your personal success, but also the success of your companies.
So for people in the audience who are ready to think big, but uncertain about sort of the next steps or how to even start, what is some practical advice that you can offer them?
Well, one, I would say buy my book, Build the Damn Thing. I'll be signing books later today.
Here?
Yeah, here.
Awesome.
And I'm on the cover with like big hair and stuff like that. And I say that not because it's just my book, but it really does have the steps to building a company, particularly when you are outside of Silicon Valley. Those of us who maybe didn't go to Stanford and Harvard and MIT, but how do you do it when you're outside of those sort of networks that are really entrenched and the rules are kind of different for us? So that would be one. Two, I would say networking with other entrepreneurs. The fact that you are here today is a great step. And putting yourself out there. And I know it's really hard to do that sometimes because it's a very vulnerable place and a very vulnerable position. But putting yourself out there and meeting others and talking to others in your space, networking, building friendships, all of those things are super, super important. And the information you will get. One of the things that someone said to me, and I always remember, there is nothing new in this world. There are people who have done what you have done, and so the smartest people go find those people and get the information and learn from their mistakes rather than creating their own. So really networking, getting out, especially while you're here, set a goal to meet 5 new people. 5 people that you did not know before you came into this building, set a goal for yourself to meet them. And those are like two sort of really quick, practical. Read, and not just TechCrunch, but read even things that may not seem related. Especially if you're in a consumer product space, make sure that you are following the Kim Kardashians of the world. And the reason why I say that is, particularly if you're in consumer products, is that they're setting the trends that you often see that kind of come down the line. So if you want to know what's next, follow the people who are the trendsetters in your space. If you're in renewable energy, follow those who are leading in that space and talking about it, and really like following, seeing what they're doing and listening. Those are some very easy things that you can do that are relatively low cost.
That's great and practical, and things that you can start implementing here. So, you know, I see you guys have been a great audience because I see you, practically nobody's on their phones. Like some people come to these conferences and then they're on the phone. Like be present, be here, pull out the phone, yes, to exchange information, but really truly be intentional about how you're spending your time in this space. We have 5 minutes left, and because, you know, this has been kind of improvised, I would love to see Bianca and the team here backstage. I'd love to get a mic on here to see if somebody wants to ask a question. But while I see if that is available to us, let me ask you a question in terms of how you measure these big goals for yourself, right? So when you're measuring progress toward big goals, you know, how do you challenge these conventional sort of metrics of success?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard question. I think I always start with the baseline, right? So I actually start with the convention. What is the convention?
Oh, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a mic here, so if you have a question for Kathryn, please raise your hand, and a mic runner will come to you.
And so I would say start with the convention and add 20%, right? If you want to set a bigger goal. So if the convention is, for example, in venture capital, if it's that your fund's only going to have a 20% return, then shoot for 30, 40%. If normally in your space, it's that you're only going to sell $1 million the first year, set a goal for yourself of $1.5 million, right? So it's convention plus, convention X, and that's how I sort of start with.
We have a question here in the back. If you can stand up and tell us your name and where you're from.
Thank you. I'm Daniel from Lima, Peru.
Oh, hi.
Thank you, Kathryn. I just was wondering how or what is your approach to transmit or convey a business or entrepreneurship in your children or in your son?
Oh, that's a beautiful question.
That's a really great question. Thank you, Daniel. How do I encourage my son to be an entrepreneur? One of the things I think we do as parents sometimes is that we don't allow our kids to see what we do. So I actually bring my son with me to speeches. My son has sat in on pitches.
Oh, wow.
For our, and I asked his opinion afterwards, like, what did you think of that pitch? Is this something that you would be, what did you like, what you didn't like? So as a parent, one of the easiest things you can do is bring your kids with you. You would be surprised how, one, they love spending time with you, and two, they actually know what it is that you do. And I think that's really, really important. So my son knows I'm here giving a speech to you amazing people. He knows what that means. It's not like mommy's going off in a black box doing, he knows what it means for mommy to give a speech because he's been to a number of speeches. He wish he was here today. He's in school. But bringing your kids along, and then what will happen is they'll start to come up with things. So my son is really into fashion. And he's already created his own fashion line. It's called Christian Laright is his brand. He made the bracelet I have on, and he's making bracelets, and I encourage it, and today I'm gonna show him a picture of me wearing the bracelet, but it's little things like that. So bring your kids along. I see 3 young gentlemen here. I love, yes, so glad that you all are here. Like, bring them and have them see. You would be amazed how much kids absorb.
Thank you, Daniel, for your question. That's all the time we have. Kathryn, can I get a big round of applause for Kathryn Finney?
Yeah.
Let me help you out.